Underneath all the noise right now, I keep hearing the same question from small business owners. What am I supposed to be doing with all of this? AI is changing how we work, buyers feel different, the market feels uncertain, and there's no shortage of advice telling business owners to move faster, adapt quicker, automate more, or add something new before they get left behind. I get why that pressure is there, but I'm not sure more is always the answer. In this episode, I'm sitting down with Lydia Lee, a business strategist and work reinvention coach who has owned her own small but mighty business for over 10 years. Lydia is also a friend who has navigated plenty of twists and turns in her own business. And one of the things I appreciate about her is how grounded she stays in seasons of uncertainty. So this conversation felt like the kind of honest reset many business owners need right now. We talk about overwhelm, simplification, AI, relationships, and why growth has to be tied to the season of life and business you're actually in. Instead of asking, what should I add next? This conversation starts with a different question. What do you actually need right now? Let's get into it. Welcome to the Small But Mighty Agency podcast. If you want to grow an agency to 7 figures and beyond without working more hours in your business, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Audrey Joy Kwan. I know what it takes to build an agency, including supporting an agency owner in selling and exiting. I also have a master's degree in communications, specializing in organizational development. My team and I have worked behind the scenes of multiple 7-figure agencies and have coached and consulted with over 150 agency owners. All this to say, when you join us on the Small But Mighty Agency podcast, you get real world experience and practical tips that help you work less, earn more, and lead with integrity. So let's go. Hey friends, today's episode is a little bit different. This isn't a tidy framework conversation. It's not a step-by-step strategy breakdown. It's more of a real talk. Lydia and I have both been working with experienced small but mighty business owners, people who have already built something meaningful, and we've both been noticing a shift. The market feels different, buyers feel different, and overall energy feels different. And what small business owners need right now isn't necessarily more tactics. So today we're just having an honest conversation about what we're seeing, what's working, what's not, and what actually empowers growth in this season. So let's get to it. Lydia, it is so good to have you here. Why don't we start with a quick introduction?
Well, I'm glad you are a small but mighty gal because you and I totally bonded on that. I'm a tiny business strategist and a work reinvention coach. And those two things go together because I think when we do decide and make a conscious decision to, you know, build a business that's more in alignment with the spaciousness and time freedom and our lifestyle. And that usually is sort of like not this big empire, right? It's like a lifestyle focused business, but also something that makes us money to be able to live the life we want, but aren't like consumed by the business. And when we do that, there is a work reinvention that has to happen there, where it's like we have to look at our identity and our belief systems, even about what it takes for us to be successful. What is the definition of success, right? That may have evolved since the first year we ever started a business. So that's why I say the both titles got to go hand in hand. I haven't figured one out yet that kind of encompasses like tiny business designer and work reinvention coach, but they both kind of go together because I think work is such a big part of our lives, and for us to define what that work is and how our skills have changed and transformed over the years to be able to design a business that keeps up with us as we grow as human beings.
I'm all for that. Designing a business that meets your lifestyle. I am all for building a business that meets us where we're at and building a business that isn't about chasing someone else's script. We talk a lot about that on the Small But Mighty Agency podcast. Today, I want to talk more about what you see happening for smaller business owners. We both work with small businesses and we've both been in this industry for a long time now. And I'm sure you're seeing a lot of shifts. I am too. And I want to know from your vantage point, what are small business owners struggling with the most right now?
That's such a good question because I'm kind of in this unique geographical location. So, for like anyone that doesn't know, I'm based in Bali in Southeast Asia, but I work with clients in three continents, right? So, I've got American clients, I have European clients, I've got Asian, Australian side of the region. So, I really get like a world view on the pulse and what happens. And there are some slight differences. A lot of my American clients, obviously, at the moment, right now, there's a feeling of distress of like economically, politically, things that are going on that might affect sometimes how they do business or who they do business with. But what I kind of see as the primary thing of a feeling that a lot of small business owners have, even the ones that have been around for a decade or more, is this sense of overwhelm that there's so with technology and the platforms and the so many ways, the beautiful ways to offer your work, which sounds great, but also it makes indecision of what to do next really hard because there are so many doors that you can go through. And especially with AI being involved and kind of knowing, oh, where are the threats and what's going to be part of my work that's going to be non-existent or taken over with the bots 5 years down the road. There is a bit of anxiety around that. But mainly I think it's like there seems to be 100 different ways I can reinvent myself, offer different things, market X amount of times or amount of places. What is it that I do? And there's sort of a sense of there's so many options and they struggle with doing what their colleagues are doing. Like, oh, well, in the coaching industry, this is the pattern of how things are done. Should I be doing that? There's all these questions I get a lot in coaching calls of like, hey, is it about Instagram now or is that old and should I do TikTok? There's all these technical questions about stuff like that. Versus, I think an opportunity, and maybe this is sort of part of our conversation today, is like this opportunity to like, how do we listen and observe and examine our own voice and our own desires of what's right for us when the outside world feels so noisy, right? So full of options that are very tempting to say yes to. And if we want to simplify our businesses, especially people who are trying to get to a small but mighty business, there's got to be almost like horse blinders on of recalibrating ourselves to understand what we need in order to make decisions for ourselves versus just seeing what's out there, and how things are done as usual, which is always a hard thing for people.
In a small but mighty business, the reality is you do have less resources, which means that your bandwidth is also smaller than a company that might have 30 employees. And we can't talk about small businesses without talking about technology and AI. There's a lot of noise in AI. What I'm really seeing is people getting distracted by what they need to do in the AI world, what gadgets and apps they need to pay attention to. I think that is overwhelming for people right now. And layering in complexity is what I'm seeing happening. So, with more newness happening, with all these different tools and things, people are making things a lot more complex than it actually needs to be. And that creates overwhelm for a lot of business owners. We're in a time where there's a lot of uncertainty. When there's a lot of uncertainty, there's kind of this reaction, which is, I'm going to add more things. It's the whole analogy of throwing spaghetti at the wall, hoping something sticks. But the challenge with that when you're a small business owner and you're just adding more and more and more is that at some point in time, it's going to break, right? You can't just keep adding more. And that's what I'm seeing right now in the small business world.
That's such a good point. Like that panic, especially after, people writing so many articles on like, AI is going to take over this and that, and you better adapt or die. There's this sort of theme of the panic kind of driven articles that are out there right now, which a lot of them I agree with is, hey, learn something new, adapt to new tech and skills that might include this tech. But it's, I think, less with that sort of, oh my God, this is inevitable and you better, include AI and all this different types of ways of how technology is going to enhance your business and do more of that versus I think actually in the era of tech sometimes is more useful to kind of go where do I belong as a human that isn't actually tech driven at all, that going back to the grassroots of how businesses used to get clients, which is through relationships and conversations and taking people out for coffee and checking in on people and actually caring about people, not as a number or as a client or a revenue point, right? But as someone I enjoy spending time with. And those types of relationships cannot be duplicated by some automated bot that's going to send notes to your clients. They're going to know. People know when it's auto reply. And so, like, that's the part that I am thinking more about double downing on, actually. Like, if I was going to do more in anything, is going to be doing more in the human perspective of like what can't be replaced as much in my business, instead of worrying about what new tech I need to automate in my business to automate my entire thing when everyone else is doing it too.
100%. I was going to ask you the question, do you think growth requires something different today than it did 3 or 4 years ago? But I think you and I both agree that it's not about doing something different than 2 or 3 years ago. It's about the foundational pieces that have traditionally helped businesses succeed are now being resurfaced as key and important, and that is relationships. Relationships have always been the foundation of good business, and in our online world, the need for volume and the need for hustle and growth that is exponential. I think people have in the last couple of years tried to game the relationship system, like mass outreaches that for a time being they worked, and these days, again, with AI happening, with people knowing that a lot of stuff out there could be fake and there's no human behind it, that things like cold outreaches aren't working like they used to, if at all. And so there is this kind of going back to the origins of business, which is relationship building and word of mouth. It's word of mouth.
Yeah, the unsexy stuff.
Unsexy, but here's the thing. I hear people say this all the time. Like, you can't scale word of mouth. And I agree. I agree. You can't scale word of mouth. Okay, that there is a truth to that. And yet at that same time, does that mean it's not something we should be doing in our business? Looking at word of mouth as a strategy in our business, looking at strategic partnerships. Those are all strategies for word of mouth. I think more now than ever, we need to be leading back into those aspects and asking ourselves, where is our relationship strategy weak and where is it strong?
Scale is like we only link the word scale to metrics of numbers, growth metrics of like how many clients, how many subscribers, how much revenue. It's always this number related piece. But to me, scaling can also mean even this podcast, like we're in this conversation together, we have already scaled by having our audiences know each other that wouldn't have known each other before, you know? And I just think that like going back to your initial kind of thought around growth, this sort of what is the change of how business owners should be growing now, or what is the growth direction now compared to 3 to 4 years ago? And my answer to that is it depends on you, right? Growth is not this one playbook that everyone should follow, because my growth could be different. For example, this year, I'm building a house. I want to make more money than I did before because I got to pay cash here, right? There's no mortgages for me. So there's a difference in why I'm making this money. It's not just because I want to double my income. There's a real meaning, purpose to the dollar. Like every dollar has a purpose is kind of how I believe in it. And that's not going to last forever. It's a season in my business that I want to earn more. I want to maybe raise my prices more, right? Do more. And there's still boundaries to that, but I'm acknowledging that's why I'm making more money. And in other times of my life, I've had health stuff. I'm going through more symptoms of perimenopause and have more rest and, not work like 30, 40 hours a week and bring it down because there's other things that I want to focus on. Like when my aunt had cancer and I had to go back to Malaysia a few times a year to take care of her. That's my growth at that year because there are these other reasons to grow or not grow. And that's so dependent on, and I think that's something, yeah, we should talk about more. That is the growth metrics is really about your life, your decisions, your season of life, and your growth metrics may look very different from other people. And sometimes it may not look like the numbers grow, but actually they might stay sustainable, as in you're solidly sustainable, but maybe you're taking a lot less time working with people or marketing or whatever, but you're still kind of maintaining the status quo of your salary or your revenue. And that's a win. Beautiful win. Don't need to double that income if you don't need to.
Yeah, we're talking about your definition of growth. And growth doesn't necessarily mean that it's a number tied to a revenue line in your business. In any business, big or small, you often need to choose the season you're in, especially for small businesses. the season you're in could mean, sure, this could be a sprint for revenue, or this could be a sprint for stabilization, which could be systems, or this could simply be a step back and enjoy what you built season.
Yeah.
I think that we have to identify what growth means for us in our business and not compare it to what other people are defining as growth right now. That's very important. And more so, it's so easy when you're in the entrepreneur world to compare yourself to what your friend is doing this year and then feel like you're behind because you're doing different things. And that's human nature, sure. And at the same time, it's not realistic because all our lives are different and we want different things. It's really important, especially in where we are right now in the world where there is a lot of noise, there is a lot of things going on, to ask the real important question, which is, what do you really want? And tie success back to that. And I really loved how you share that in this season right now, you have your reasons for wanting it. And for other people who are looking at their life and their business, the primary question is, what do you need right now outside
Mm.
of what everyone else is doing?
Yeah, beautifully said. I love that. What do you need is actually such a beautiful question, because sometimes for me, I take every quarter, I take 3 nights off away, and do like a quarterly retreat, which helps me to not be working and just like think about what's the need. And need is not sometimes like, oh, I need more clients or I need more, like specific assets in my business, but sometimes a need is emotional. For example, like when I did my end of year retreat of last year, one of the big things that came to me was like, oh man, I really love living in Bali and I have a great community here, but I need, what I'm feeling kind of like a little bit isolated around is meeting really awesome business owners that don't think I'm crazy for not wanting to build an empire, and would support me in like simplifying and being a minimalist in my business. And we could just jam for hours, to get there. And I wasn't finding as many of that. Like I go to a lot of entrepreneurship events and blah blah blah, but it was kind of again the same types of people that are like, okay, how do we like hack the internet marketing game and all the bro marketing hacks? And I'm like, I don't want to do this. I've done this before. It doesn't work for me. Can we please meet someone else? So this was a need, right? And so when I discovered that in my retreat, I could take an action about that. Like I could really look for, and then I booked actually a beautiful retreat in the south of France for the summer of this year to be meeting people that are hiking across the Alps, that are business owners and founders. And the whole premise of the entire retreat is to have conversations, not just workshops and strategy meetings and da da da, but just like allow our bodies to move in nature and talk about what success means to us, talk about our businesses, talk about our life, and it gave me an action, which is beautiful because that need was met after that reflection.
On that note, I'm also seeing the desire for more intimate opportunities to connect with others. It's happening in IRL, so in real life experiences, but also online as well too. I think that's, I wouldn't say it's a trend. It's something that's really here to stay. I think that as much as people want to come into community and network with each other, there's this desire for not just networking, like, hey, let's talk business. Like you just shared, right? Sure, business owners coming together, they want to talk about business, but they also want to be human around each other. And then creating that safe space for people to be human, that's what I'm seeing the direction of experiences headed right now. I can definitely say that's something that I'm after more of as well too. And I think oftentimes the things that we want for ourselves are the things that we create for others as well. And I see you doing that. I see me doing that. So we're not just leaning into what we see. We're leaning into what we want for ourselves. And then we're seeing other people have the same desire for those things. I'm really glad that you brought that up, because as we're talking about disruption in the economy, disruption that's happening right now in our world, plus of course technology, whether it's that type of disruption or just this natural desire for people to want to be with real people. We're not talking about walking into rooms where you have people who are just posturing. I don't know if you've been in those rooms where you walk into a room and you feel like everyone's very buttoned up and pretending to be something they're not. I think we're done with that world. I think a lot of people are just done with that, and I'm glad to see that. I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, me too.
Right?
Yeah.
I think those places are really hard because I'm definitely not one that walks into a room where if I see cliques of people hanging out, I'm not the one to break in and be like, "Hey, let me join this conversation." Far from that. So, I love rooms that are more easygoing and casual because it just allows you to just step in and be human.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I have been thinking so much about experiences actually. Like, it's funny because when I first started my coaching practice, one of the ideas, it's so funny when you go back to like all your old notes from like 2011, 2012, when you're about like, thinking about ideas for business. And one of the things that, because I was a career coach at the time, I was doing career transitions for corporate folks and to consultancy, right? That was my niche at the time. And I remember thinking, man, what would really be helpful, especially what I've gone through, what my clients are going through, is like we don't actually need to do another like Myers-Briggs assessment or like Strengths Finder or whatever career assessment that we get put in usually. Is some of us just need a damn sabbatical. We need some space away from the usual patterns of how we operate in the world and just pluck ourselves away from that in a completely different environment with a different community with different conversations, and that will spark something. Everyone has insight. Like you don't need Myers-Briggs to tell you your strengths. You probably knew it. Myers-Briggs could validate and go, right, yeah, great. I'm glad, this test told me that. But in your hearts of hearts, you do know who you are. You do know what you want and what you need, but we don't have the spaciousness and the time and the non-distractive kind of environment to do it. And so why I've been thinking about it more now is that was needed then, but also so much more needed now. It helps me to spark some of my ideas of going back to my written journal back in the day of including nature, including, different communities people can learn from. What does that look like and what I might create even in the next 5 years?
Part of the challenge when we're sitting by ourselves and we're thinking about our own business, sometimes we tend to add a lot of things in that aren't necessary. I think it's easy when we're looking at our business to see all the things that we don't do well or not going well. I definitely do that. When I do monthly recaps, like my first thought is, what are all the things that didn't do well, work well? That's where I start, right? I know better now. We always turn to the wins and look at the wins because the strength are in the wins. But I find myself doing this too when I'm debriefing the quarter. I tend to want to stack more things into the to-do list. And for me, I think the space to really think through those things is not by myself in isolation. It really is in conversation with others, getting others to reflect back what they see and what they don't see, and making decisions from that perspective. For me, empowerment right now is less about adding and more about subtracting. And in order to do that well, I have to be in community with people who can help me see things better. I have this saying, you've heard it before. I believe that when you own a business, you are in this glass bottle and you can be the greatest, whatever it is that you do for others. But when you're in your own glass bottle, it's very hard to read that label. And so it's so important to get others to help you see what they see, help you read the label that you cannot read yourself.
Yeah, I love that. And that's something I actually started doing a little bit more last year. I mean, you and I, by the way, are due for our deep dive, 2 hour deep dive we were planning for from last year. But that was one of the things, right? Where I was like, I just like you, I don't see what I can't, I don't know what I don't know, and you can't see the forest from the trees because you're knee deep in your own jungle. I'm literally in a jungle. I'm also not a full extrovert. I'm more of an ambivert. I require a lot of alone time. And so I do like working alone, but there are moments, as you mentioned, you do need perspective. You do need to see a point of view that might be very different from you. But one of the things that I found really helpful is not just asking anybody, because everyone will give you every opinion under the moon, but being really intentional actually about only being in conversation or getting support from people that share my vision and worldview of what business should be like. And I have a lot of smart entrepreneurs around me, but not every single one of them want this cozy life. Like they think I am nuts for only working 20 hours a week and not wanting more, than that or more revenue. So if I'm talking to that person about a business problem, they're gonna maybe give me advice around scaling, right? Or how do we, right, get you more clients, right? And so I think it kind of matters who you talk to as well and how much you curate an ecosystem of who your partners are, who your colleagues are, who your peers are, so that also the values are aligned. So that when we both are workshopping something, we care about the same things that matter in our business. And that makes a huge difference in that support.
I think what you're leaning into is finding people who aren't going to judge you for where you want to be and instead look at what you want and help you grow what you want as opposed to what they think you should want. I think those are two very different things. And I've definitely been in communities where there's one growth model, right? And it's like if you don't align to this growth model, then you're wrong. That's the best way I can put it. And I personally have a hard time in that environment. And anyone who knows me or has worked with me knows that I am all about understanding what that person I'm speaking to, that I'm coaching, that I'm consulting truly wants for themselves and designing the business around that. And that requires customization. And that's one thing that you and I talk a lot about is that human touch element that we have in our business. And when you think of scale, oftentimes it's easy to lose that. It's easy to lose the human touch because in many situations where, especially if we're thinking of group coaching, group trainings, there's one path. And when there's only one path, there isn't much individualization. I have nothing against group coaching and group programs. I oftentimes feel that people joining those programs should be clear about that one path they want and know that they're committed to that one path because that's what they're signing up for. But I think for people who are exploring things and really want to figure out what is it for them that they want and not be told what they want per se, then it's hard to do that in certain vehicles.
No, I totally agree with that. To me, like things like group programs have been great to learn the fundamentals. If you're a starter about a topic, it's like, okay, let's learn together to learn how to sew this pattern or learn basics of marketing or basics of this and that. And it's great to have that camaraderie of a community to like do hard things with. But then there's that other next level of learning, which is like, how do we integrate what we're learning into what we need in how we want to do this thing. And that is so there's so much nuance in people in general, especially if you're in a people to people business, a service-based business, they will always get to a level, right? The human will always need something beyond the basics. And that depth over breadth is such an important part of a service-based business because to be truly of service, to really cause true transformation, we can't automate intimacy. We can't automate the customization. And I think that actually is one of the biggest changes I'm seeing, or more people embracing that. Instead of going, how do I get a passive income product? How do I get this thing that runs and puts money in my PayPal account while I sleep? It's actually more about, okay, now that people can learn stuff on ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, what's going to make it different? I no longer can just come up with a course and put a bunch of videos and content and workbooks in front of people because they can get it through a bot. So what else can we provide? How do we humanize, as you say, that process of service, like back to the grassroots reason to exist is to really be a partner to our clients, right? To answer to the nuance, to hold that space in a way that you see it through their body language, you see it through the patterns, like AI can't do that. So that's the part that I think is the most interesting to me, the most exciting part is that it's forcing us to come back to those values and those human foundations that I think make a service-based business special and important.
The word that really jumps out at me is partnerships. When I'm thinking about working with someone, I'm thinking about how can we partner to do something better or greater. Tools like ChatGPT, there's no human partnership there. There's no relationship there. And for me, I think that in any service-based business, that's where we're going. It's less about the tactics because guess what? GPT, like you just said, can give you all the tactics with a prompt or two prompts. But true partnership, that happens through relationship. That is a key differentiator right now in how people are doing business. How are they setting themselves up to be partners with their clients? What I'm also seeing is this. I think that it's becoming more and more important to have a specialization because LLMs, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever you use, they're the generalists. So I use this example. If you're coming into a sales conversation, do you want that person to immediately identify a challenge that you're going through and pinpoint what they already see in your business versus the person across from you asking you 5 questions to figure out what the problem is? Who will you have more trust in? The person who asks you 5, 6 different questions to figure out where you're at, or the person who comes on a call and has experienced your niche so they already know what the true challenges are and can speak into them right away? That shortens the buyer cycle faster. And that's important. In order to do that, in order to find a niche, find an industry, it actually requires simplification. And the challenge when people think about simplification is that it's about shrinking. But we have to think about it as reclaiming leverage in your business. And I know for you, you've been working on specializing more and you're seeing the power of that as well too.
I mean, as a recovering people pleaser, I am someone prone to want to help. I'm like, I love helping. I mean, I'm sure there's an ego thing behind that too, like being needed and things like that, right? That is a childhood thing my therapist have been working on. But you're so right about the specialization. It's harder said than done for sure, because like I said, whenever we make any true change or transformation, there's a threat to our identity that is tied to a way we're doing something, tied to what people know us for and produce. And so even this year, I've been going through a big evolving change with Screw the Cubicle. Like I announced it, on LinkedIn, and like sort of the story around that evolving change. But it was a lot of grieving around that too, because for over a decade, I was known for something very specific, which is corporate escape. I mean, hello, Screw the Cubicle, pretty self-explanatory. But that's 12 years ago. I am no longer in that world. And even though I can help with that world, I'm good at it, my heart isn't there anymore, because who I am as an individual has grown to a different place, right? And where I'm most impactful, I think, is so much more beyond the beginner business topics that I was sort of known for, right? And so tiny business was sort of this idea that was floating around in the past like 3 to 4 years that I didn't even have a program for. I just started talking about tiny business revolution in podcasts and still being known as corporate escape coach. And it was like slowly I had to kind of sustainably, just wasn't that girl that was built to just jump off a cliff and be like, you know what, screw the cubicle. I'm going to just start a whole new brand right away and offer this whole new thing about tiny business right now. I couldn't. It took me like 3 years to actually run both kind of side by side and have two different pathways, because it took that much time for me to feel confident in a way to want to double down on tiny business and a different clientele and a different audience type. And I think it's okay to do that too. That is not a decision that needs to be made overnight. This is who you are. Has been a big part of your chapter. And sometimes there's ways to experiment with, hey, could I have done two pathways? I tried that. It worked, but I was exhausted because, beginners and seasoned solopreneurs need different messaging, need different topics, need different depth. And I found myself not being able to go into the depth because I was trying to serve two audiences, right? So you're right. Choosing that specialization makes everything else easier, because now I know who I'm speaking to. Now I know everything in and out about this one soulmate client, which is so important to me. And more importantly, all my peers and my colleagues who now know me for this, they easily can refer. They easily know when to talk about me because I'm not sitting on the fence between two types of niches. And that I think is important to share for sure.
Thanks for sharing that. I think it's really helpful hearing that it's not this straight path and it took going back and forth. And that's okay. Oftentimes, when you think about specialization, people feel this immense pressure to make an immediate decision and then announce it in all the marketing and plant the flag. But it might take a month to get there, it might take a year to get there, and that's okay. To close off here, despite everything feeling noisy, what feels hopeful to you about small businesses right now?
Such a beautiful question. There's a few things for sure, and some of them we definitely talked about today. But one of the things that seem to be kind of lighting a kind of warm feeling in my heart right now is how much I think the future for small business to thrive is not in isolation, not in this, I'm the one achieving all the things in my business on my own, but there's this sort of call for collaboration and, like we say, partnerships and aligned partnerships of people that are not only going to send you clients and refer you, but they're involved in your business, like almost like a private counsel for your business, but actually like having friendships and relationships. I mean, even you and I sometimes will go months without talking, but when we do, we're very involved in supporting each other and having those allies, knowing that you don't need to have a big team. That's a future I'm like stoked about because I don't want to do this alone. It's not so fun to do it by yourself. And even thinking about one of my goals after my end of year retreat, I had a big thing on my journal that says, make marketing fun again. Was my big large font thing across, my journal. And what I meant by that is, yeah, marketing's become like a chore. After doing this for 12 years, even though, yeah, okay, I can market well, there's a lot of things I don't want to do anymore. I'm so like, I don't want to do any more performative marketing. I don't want to be the only gal with all the answers. I don't want to have to write things that are going to be SEO friendly only to be able to attract the right audience type now. I want to just make marketing fun. And fun to me meant not alone. Fun to me meant like conversations we're having now where we get to just be jamming and talking and not this over produced kind of video or podcast, and just two people wanting to share our background, our open the hood, be honest. And also people who are willing to say, you know what? I don't know what to do either. I'm also figuring this out. Let's figure it out together. That just brings tears to my eyes because I'm like, that feeling of support and feeling of you don't need to carry all that on your own. You don't need to know everything to be a thriving entrepreneur. That actually the better way to be supported and sustainable is to have allyship, is to have this ecosystem of support that I'm really excited to even invest into more and commit to more this year.
I'm with you on that. The beauty of where we're headed right now is relationships matter more than ever. And that to me is a good thing. The word ecosystem and understanding who you want in your ecosystem, building that ecosystem, if that means not doing it alone, I am all for that. What's also exciting is this return to just being human. I know that sounds like such a weird thing to say, but the return to being human. What's interesting is seeing how people show up online. Yes, there's a lot of slop out there, but what's really interesting is seeing how, because there's a lot of slop, people are making more of an effort to be human online. I love seeing conversations that you can tell they had an idea and didn't use AI. I actually am more amped to read that. What's really exciting is before where I wouldn't look at like a unstructured post because I would think, okay, well, this isn't good marketing. But now I'm more amped to read it because I'm thinking, this person doesn't care. This is amazing. The return to being more human is exciting for me. That being said, though, I'm sure people who are marketers out there who listen to this podcast will probably think, what do you mean? You have to think about the marketing principles when you're copywriting. I'm like, sure, of course you do. But I'm also really engaged right now in things that don't look like marketing speak.
Yeah, that's also working. You see, there's no one principle. That does work. Same with video. Nowadays, you've got all the apps to make all these videos look, you don't know what's real anymore. And now I'm really drawn to back in the day in Facebook when no one knew how to use it and we're all shaky with our selfie video and like, we're just like, look at what I'm eating today. And I'm like, yes, that's when social media was awesome.
I love that. Okay, I want to wrap up here. Tell us where we can find you.
Well, the best place is going to be my website, screwthecubicle.com. And in there, right on the homepage, you'll be able to see, I always sort of recommend, like, if you are interested to kind of get a hold of like what I talk about, what my framework for the tiny business method is, and sort of how it can support you in making some of those intentional decisions for your business at the moment, is the best place to go is to check out my YouTube channel, which is right there on my website. Or you can just go to YouTube and type in Screw the Cubicle, you'll find me. There's a lot of great free resources there. And I think that's a great place to start. And then finally, there is a really nice quiz that's right on the top of my website as well. So if you're kind of in that mode of like, you know what, this business have gotten a little too complex, too many moving parts, too much like complicated things for me to run this business. And I'm not quite sure which lever to pull. I'm not quite sure what to fix. There is a quiz there that actually will help you to determine and identify what's making your business complex and some tips on how to fix it and repair it, or at least open up that conversation of what you need to assess for yourself.
Thank you so much. Hey, thanks for hanging out with me at the Small But Mighty Agency podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you hit the follow or subscribe button in your podcast app and share it with a friend. I'll see you on the next one.